very interesting place in Torah this week. The Torah portion we have been studying is called Chayei Sarah. It means the life of Sarah. And it's a paradoxical title because the Torah portion opens with Sarah's death. And the Torah portion closes with Abraham's death. So it is a moment in history in the Torah that invites a closing of a chapter. The generation of leaders dies. And then a new generation arises. The death of Sarah and the death of Abraham are kind of a bracket on both sides of the meeting of Isaac and Rebekah. And that new generation is the one through which the story of God awakening continues to be told. And you can tell already the flavor of the story is shifting. New beings, new leadership means that the story is told through their eyes, and it feels different. So I was, looking at those passages early this week and holding in consciousness the multifaceted aspects of what happens when leadership dies physically, and then new beings come to the surface to move the story a little further. And I was wrestling with that Monday and Tuesday. I began to receive all these emails in my inbox, reading all these articles in honor and commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the assassination of Yitzak Rabin, November 5th, 1995. And it was just uncanny to just be studying this Torah portion that is about the death of major leadership figures in Abraham and Sarah. At the same time, reading those articles about the death of Rabin. I know there is no mistake. But it brought me back 20 years ago. I had forgotten that 20 years had passed. November 4th was the Shabbat, the end of Shabbat, where the rally took place in Tel Aviv on what is now called Rabin Square. It was named after him, after his death. And it was a peculiar day in my life. Amy is my wife and the mother of my 2 children. Amy and I were spending what was supposed to be our last day together, ever. The next day she was getting on a plane. We were in Jerusalem. Sorry, I didn't mention that. We were in Jerusalem together, and when the news broke, and spent the evening watching TV, crying, holding each other in disbelief of what we were saying. She was getting on the plane the next day, moving back to the United States. And I was getting on the bus from Tel Aviv to southern Lebanon, because I was an Israeli soldier, and I was going back to base, back to fighting the Hezbollah on the plains of Lebanon. And we were not to see each other again. This was that day. You know, one of those days that changes everything? I mean, we can only speculate, but there are times where I find myself thinking that if Rabin had not been assassinated on that day, we might have today a Palestinian state and an Israeli state side by side in the Middle East. So the consequences of that act were tremendous. I mean, looking at it from geopolitical standpoint, we can see how much the world changed after that evening. In a lot of ways, for me, the last 20 years of Israeli history have been footnotes to that event. But we can't also deny the personal impact on the individuals, specifically in Israel, Palestine, but all over the world, who lived through that day. I mean, those who lived in this country in the decades of the assassination of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, MLK, know exactly what I'm talking about. How those pivotal moments touch us, move us, and change the course of our lives. November 5th was the day after his murder. My life shifted. I was in that bus that took off from Tel Aviv, going north. For the next few months, all I knew was that me and my brothers in arms were going to put each other's lives in each other's hands, day in and day out. And I stepped onto that bus and I was heartbroken. I mean, I was heartbroken because a meaningful relationship in my life was just ended. And I was heartbroken because one of my heroes was just shot dead. One of the people that I admired so much that I had moved to Israel when I turned 18 and embarked on this Zionist ideal. But in the bus, my brothers in arms, you have to understand, I was in a fighters unit, some of a Marine Corps, you would compare it here. And they were very right-wing. Most of them came from Sephardi Mizrahi families who had suffered at the hand of Arabs when they lived in Arab lands, through the time of revolutions, the time of emancipation, of independence from the rule of the empires that ruled over them for hundreds of years. And the Jews who lived in those Arab countries were kind of caught between the empire and the revoltees, the Arabs. And there was a lot of suffering. And when the Arab nations rose, they kicked the Jews out. So those families who came to Israel in the 50s, in the 60s, came with a lot of anger and anti-Arab sentiments. And those kids were the next generation of those newcomers, and all they grew up with was hearing all racist comments about Arabs from their family. from that trauma. So I stepped onto that bus, almost in tears, heartbroken. And I sit down, and the bus drives off. And my brothers sing and rejoice and are happy because they saw Rabin as the enemy who had made peace with the enemy. Israel, in the day after the assassination, became radically divided. I mean, down to the middle, 50-50. But I was shocked. And the truth is, in those few hours of that bus ride, my entire world collapsed. All that I thought I knew, all the truth that I held, all the belief that sustained me, all my Zionist ideals. By the time I got off the bus, they were just smashed to pieces. I was going to spend the next few months risking my life with these guys, and I didn't want anything to do with them anymore. I didn't want to do anything to do with Israel anymore. I didn't know who I was. Those were dark, dark months and years. The Israel that I knew when I began my military service was a completely different Israel that I met when I was finally released from service, from duty. I didn't know my friends. I didn't know the country. I didn't know how to be in that place. And so I did the only thing I could do at the time. Somehow I got a hold of Amy's phone number. She was somewhere on the East Coast. And I called her and I said, "Would you want to give us another chance?" And I guess the rest is history. November 5th, 20 years ago, when my life shifted, is the exact same day 10 years ago when I started my rabbinic journey at Bet Alef. November 5th. I get chills just thinking about it. And I had not thought about it until this week, until these emails reminding me of the 20th anniversary, 2010. That 10-year period of my life was incredible. And he got me to the door of Bet Alef. And he got me to be here in front of you today. So I guess my question is to you. It's like, how conscious are we, really, of all that has happened over the decades of our life that have brought us here tonight? Like, how conscious can we really be of that journey of ours? And I want you to take a few moments to just be with that. To just be with the small, often unnoticed little moments, side by side with those big, noticeable moments that have shifted slightly here and there your trajectory, so that you would be here tonight. When I think about that, I start crying. Because there's absolutely no way that I should be here tonight, standing in front of you in this role that I have. This little baby born in the middle of France 44 years ago and some. standing here right now, talking to you, is impossible. It is absolutely, mathematically impossible that I be here doing this because of the millions upon millions of minutes and hours that moved this soul who didn't speak a word of English, let alone Hebrew, for years, could be doing what? But if you start thinking about the millions of little moments that have made this possible, even though it's completely impossible, and multiply that by the millions upon millions of little things that have happened in each and every one of your lives that made you get in that car tonight, to walk into this sanctuary and sit exactly where you're sitting right now, listening to me. Can you fathom how impossible this moment is? Can you fathom how impossible now, here is? I mean, look around. You are here. How did that happen? And you are here, sitting next to you, who is sitting next to you. How did that happen? The miracle of now. Can we taste that? I mean, I try to teach classes about mindfulness, about being really present to here, to now. What do you get right here when I say this? Where are you? I have chills. I don't know. I can barely contain it. The impossibility of the miracle of you and me meeting. Of you meeting each other. You don't have to believe in God. Who cares? This to me is the awe of it all. Whatever you call this. But in this moment of awareness, I can touch it. I can be there. And a part of the path of mindfulness in Judaism is a lot of blessings. And if you live in that consciousness of the miracle of each other meeting, every moment is a she'echianu. Every moment is a she'echianu. Because when we bless with the she'echianu is that which blesses now. Right? We open our heart in impossible gratitude for this breath right now. For us sitting here right now. But as we do that, we can't help but bless all the other moments. Good, bad, dark, and joyous. Assassinations and births. So that we could open our heart to the awe in amazement of meeting now.